Hey dancers, welcome back to Broche Banter. I'm your host, Julie. Today we are rounding out season 2 of the podcast, Broche Banter, with the Facets of Ballet, Facet number 10. Now, throughout this entire podcast, we've been breaking down the elements of ballet into all the different facets where I see you can really specialize, hone in, or decide to leave any of the parts of ballet. This season has been all about how to make ballet yours and how to make ballet exactly what you want it to be, how to get what you want from ballet, and how to really study each of the independent facets of ballet. So today we're going to go over facet number 10, ballet for life. What I mean by this is it's going to take a long time to get good at ballet. Most of the goals take quite some time. They take a lot of patience, a lot of practice, and a lot of effort and repetition. This takes time, and you have to keep going for long enough to get good at it. Now, as an adult, this is actually pretty difficult to do. Over my career as a ballet teacher, I've been fascinated by the concept of motivation. Why do some people keep going and some people quit? Why do people stick with it and others give up at different points? How ballet weaves in and out of somebody's life. They move to different places. They go through different phases in their career, different chapters with their kids, different injuries or issues with their body. They come in and out of the studio over long periods of time. And how do you weave ballet into somebody's life in this way? It's not so linear and so structured as it is when you're training children who go from basically a young age until professional level with fewer breaks, with fewer interruptions in their training. When you're an adult, your ballet training is often woven into your life. It's woven into all these ups and downs of everything. And so how do you stay motivated? How do you stay motivated to keep going through all of this? How do you keep going to the studio over and over and over again throughout the course of your life? Now, as an adult, there's so many things that you need to do. There's so many have-to-dos. There's so many responsibilities, whether it's your job or your family or your kids or taking care of your household. And so every time you go to the ballet studio, you have to choose ballet over something else in your life. You have to choose ballet over family. You have to choose it over friends, over other leisure activities, over resting, over relaxing, over meal prepping. There's so many things that you need to choose ballet over in order to be able to do, where it's all about balancing and juggling the different priorities of life. So what keeps people saying yes to ballet over and over again? How do you help people say yes to their ballet practice frequently and for long enough to actually reach their goals? I think motivation is such an interesting concept, and I think right now it's kind of trendy and popular to say that discipline beats motivation every time, where motivation comes and goes, but discipline is what keeps you coming back no matter the circumstances, no matter how you feel. But I think for a lot of adults, and especially a lot of adult women, what chips away at our motivation is a couple of things. The lack of permission, unclear priorities, or feeling like there isn't a purpose or a point. So let's kind of break these three areas down when it comes to your quote unquote discipline or motivation. So first of all, I think about motivation there's two ways to look at it. Number one, you can think about motivation as something that you have to fill up with different activities, or you can think of motivation as something that is naturally full, that things are going to chip away at. So the first is, I think, the popular way to think about motivation, that you have to build motivation. You have to read inspirational quotes. You have to look at inspiring photos. You have to look at a vision board. You have to create motivation from nothing. The other way you can look at motivation is that you want this. You really want this, and you are naturally inclined to want to pursue it. And there are things that are going to chip away at your motivation level, things that are going to chip away at it, such as a failure in the studio, or negative words from a teacher or from yourself, or not looking or feeling your best that day, or having too many things going on in your life where you don't feel you have the time for it. These things can take away your motivation. So you can kind of think of it in either direction. Are you one who has little motivation? You have to build your motivation up, or is it that you have this overflowing cup of motivation that little things pour some water out of and take away your motivation? So I think those three important P's that I talked about with your motivation to keep showing up: you need permission, you need clear priorities, and you need a purpose or feel like there is a point. So permission. Do you need permission to go to ballet class instead of the other things that we talked about? And maybe it's just you yourself, that you need to give yourself the permission to go and to work towards something like ballet. Maybe you need to have an honest conversation with family or with friends or with your boss or with your clients that give yourself and create the permission for you to pursue this goal. Maybe it's something that you need to give yourself You need to have an honest conversation with yourself about your priorities, where you need to say, like, my priority right now is work or family or ballet, or where those priorities fall for yourself. Because if ballet is not a top priority, if there's many more things competing for it above ballet, then no matter how much you want it, how much motivation you build up, if you don't have the permission to go, again, whether from yourself or externally, or you don't have it as a top priority, it's not going to fit into your life. We have a fixed amount of time, we have a fixed amount of energy, and if it's not a priority and you don't feel you have permission to go, you're not going to go to ballet class and put in the practice towards it. And then third, I think having a purpose is really important. So when you're an adult, I think one of the early questions that you have, and one that kind of plagues us throughout our journey, is what's the point? What's the purpose of this? Is this worth my time? Am I making a fool of myself? Is this worth the effort and the energy that I'm putting in? What's the point of it all? What am I working towards? We need hope. We need role models to know how far we can go and what we can do with it. We need something to work towards. We need a purpose. We need to feel like that we belong in the ballet studio and in the ballet community. We need a community of people who are like us to show us that it's worth it to keep going. We need all of these things to create that purpose that gives us the motivation to go to class and doesn't chip away from that motivation. All those negative things can really chip away at your motivation and make it feel like you can't go to class or it's not worth it to go to class. So thinking about those three aspects that allow you to tap into your motivation and allow you to stick with the discipline that you've created: the permission, setting priorities, and having a clear purpose or a point to what you're doing. Honestly, as an adult pursuing ballet or anything difficult in your spare time, doubt comes regularly. Doubt is part of the creative process. Doubt is part of the process of trying new and difficult things, and especially early on in the journey, early on when everything is new and you're challenged by everything, or when you're at a plateau or you reach an injury or you reach these sort of like turning points in your life, doubt comes. And just like brushing your teeth every day we need to clear the doubt in order to keep going. We need to have an answer for the questions about why bother? What is it for? How good can I get? Does my work even matter? Am I wasting my time? These questions are going to come up and we need to be able to answer them. And I think for all of us, belief precedes the work. If you don't believe, you won't even bother trying. If you do believe that it's possible, that it's worthwhile, that you can get better, that progress is possible, it's not a guarantee, but it's at least the first step to trying, like giving it a real try. The belief has to precede the work. The answer is why bother? What's it for? The purpose, the permission, the priorities, all of that has to precede the work. If those things aren't in place, the work can't even start. What happens when those aren't in place is just this quiet quitting that lets ballet fade away. You miss 1 week, you miss 2 weeks, you miss 3 weeks. Before you know it, it's been 6 weeks, 8 weeks, you're out of the studio. Then you're facing the hurdles of, why did I let it go for so long? It's going to be so difficult to get everything back. And then you feel this difficult challenge of loss and you have to fight that uphill battle from there. Again, in that case, the belief still precedes the work. Those three things: the permission to go back into it even though you took a break, the priority that it is important to you, that it is meaningful, that it does positively impact your family and your community, and the purpose, that it's worth it, that pursuing art for art's sake gives us meaning and direction and purpose in our life. It fits us into a great community. It gives us something to work towards. It gives us something to see our growth and to measure our growth, and a little playground outside of our responsibilities. It lets us find a place where we belong, with students and with teachers and with opportunities. Now, I think with adults learning ballet, motivation is so different than someone who's learning as a kid, either trying to make a career out of it, or just because that's what they're doing, that's what all their friends are doing, their parents put them in it. They might love it themselves too, but the purpose and the motivation is very different in childhood than it is in adulthood. Even if you look at learning languages as a kid versus as an adult, as a kid, you are learning a language for a very different reason than you might learn a second language as an adult. As a kid, when you're learning languages in school, the curriculum is very different than when you're an adult starting to learn a language. When you're an adult starting to learn a language, it is very purpose-driven. It is because you're taking a trip, or because you need to communicate with your mother-in-law, or because you need to be able to communicate with family members, or because you're trying to be able to communicate a specific thing in business or in a negotiation with somebody in another language. These are all very purpose-driven reasons for learning that language. Now, to just learn a language for the sake of learning it is pretty hard when you're an adult. And again, you have all of this stuff that you could be doing instead. So really having that purpose to learn gives you not only the reason to make the time for it, but also the constraints to take the learning down to actually a reasonable amount to learn in the limited time you have as an adult. If you're thinking about learning a language in a business context, the words and the vocabulary that you need to learn is going to be different and also smaller than if you're learning it generally as a whole for the purpose of fluency. If you're going to be traveling, the vocabulary that you're going to be learning is constrained, it's finite, it's smaller, and you can learn and be reasonably good at a smaller amount of vocabulary to go on that trip, go to that place, feel confident communicating with the people there, and really master that bit. So I see ballet as no different. It can be very purpose-driven as an adult. So people will come in with very specific goals as an adult. Their goal might be to dance freely. Their goal might be to learn a pirouette. Their goal might be to get point shoes or to jump. They have a very specific goal, or maybe they have a piece that they want to perform. When you have a really specific goal, it's extremely helpful for motivation because it takes care of the purpose thing right away. You have something that you're already trying to do, achieve, and create. And it also sort of takes some of the pressure off of learning every single facet of ballet. Because as we've been talking this whole season, there is so much to learn in ballet. There is so much. And you can learn all of it, but it all takes time. Each element takes a lot of time. So if you can whittle down what you're trying to learn to the things that matter to you most, you've got a better chance at being able to actually master those areas versus trying to touch every single part of ballet that ever exists, mastering every single vocabulary word at once. If you're purpose-driven and you're focused on what you want and what you're trying to create, you have a great chance at really mastering those things because, again, like the language, you've selected a finite, constrained version of the whole of ballet that you can really learn. So while, yes, learning the basics is where we all begin, from there, from that first year or two of base, where you decide to focus in your time can be very purpose-driven, and it can help you so much with the doubt that comes, with the motivation to keep working, and with the direction to feel like you're actually going to be able to get somewhere within this very, very wide world of ballet. It can also alleviate the pressure on things like if you have an injury or something where you can't do part of ballet, that you can still feel like you're doing ballet in the smaller part that actually matters to you and is important to you without getting so hung up on the areas that aren't possible for you in this current moment. One of the reasons I created, actually the biggest reason that I created the International Adult Ballet Festival was because of motivation, was because that I know that when you are an adult learning something, the motivation is key. You need to have something to work towards. And for a lot of people, having a performance to work towards is a really big motivator. So I wanted to give people the ability to decide on a solo, to decide on a variation, to pick a costume that they wanted to work towards wearing, to have a reason to work to get on point so they can be in a piece in point shoes, to give people a answer to the question of what's it for? What is this leading to? What's the purpose of all of this? If you don't have an answer to this of like, where could I go with this? I think in many cases, it's very hard to stick with it, to see a purpose for it. And so if you're someone who wants to perform, having that performance to work towards can really answer those questions on the hard days and make it worthwhile and give you the motivation and the wherewithal to work through those difficult times to find yourself on the stage. It's also why I created Broche magazine, is to give you another outlet for quote unquote, what is it all for? You could be in a magazine. You can tell your story in a magazine. You can go and get the beautiful photos taken with a gorgeous costume and be printed in a magazine. You can also use that as inspiration for your ballet journey to read the stories of people who are like you and who have gone through trials and tribulations with ballet. What's it for? What does it mean to them? And get inspiration from other people like you, finding a place in the community, finding a place that you belong, and really trying to see yourself in it. All of the visuals that I like to put on our merch, all of the silhouettes are silhouettes of adult dancers. I think there's so much that eats away at us is like, do I belong here? Am I cut out for this? Is ballet made for me? Am I made for ballet? And so it's really important to me to have the visuals in ballet match the people who I see doing it every day in my classes. The visuals in ballet, of course, the pros are extremely beautiful and I love looking at them too. But for someone who is beginning ballet in midlife or in adulthood, they're going to be plagued with the question, like, am I cut out for this? Is this for me? And the visuals and the stories and the pictures, I want them to represent people like you, people like us who are in this boat trying to learn this beautiful art form as adults. You know, a couple of other interesting things with ballet, learning ballet in adulthood is Especially like for some people, ballet ballet is a season and it comes and goes and they try it and they check a few boxes and they get to wear a tutu and they get to wear point shoes and then they leave ballet shortly after because they kind of reached their goal. They got what they needed out of ballet and it's in their life for a season. But for others of us, it's a life, it's a way of life. It's part of our life and our lifestyle, and it will be there for us for decades or more as we continue moving through different aspects of life. This is an interesting thing because this means that progress is going to come and go. You're not necessarily always better than you were in the past. Voluntary and involuntary breaks from ballet impact your progress and really teach us in kind of the most difficult possible way to respect and cherish our bodies even as they grow older, even as we experience injuries and setbacks, and our body can't always keep up with our wishes, with how long we wish we could practice and how long we wish we could dance. And I think one of the things that can ironically stop an adult from practicing is being overwhelmed by how much there is to practice. So often, instead of just picking a couple things to practice, we will look at all the things there are to practice and say, oh, it's too much. I can never get to all of it, and get overwhelmed and just do none of it. So first of all, I would encourage you that if you are dreaming big and you want big things for yourself, which I think you're very much allowed to want, what you want is always going to be bigger than what you can do. And that can be frustrating, but it can also be motivating and it can have a lot of different feelings with it. You can always imagine yourself, your imagination can move much faster than your actual skill set can move. And so you might imagine yourself in a tutu performing a classical variation in your point shoes on stage, and then it might take you 20 years to get there, but you can imagine it and you can taste it and you can feel it that whole time. So that gap between what you want and what you actually can do, there will always be a gap there, because as soon as you reach that goal, a new goal is going to materialize and you'll have a new gap, and that you're always going to have that gap where what you want and what you can dream of is beyond where you are. It's a good thing. You want a lot, and that's going to serve you and that's going to take you far in ballet. Learning to accept that is part of it is huge. Otherwise, that overwhelm can chip away at your motivation and make you feel like you can't actually get there. But with us big dreamers, if you're here on the podcast with me, you're probably a big dreamer too, because that's what we talk about a lot. And maybe if you're not, you've already wandered away from this space. So if you're here with me, you're a big dreamer and you want a lot of things. Don't let that desire be your reason for discouragement. When you look at yourself and you say, I'm nowhere near where I want to be, that thought alone can ironically derail you from even getting an inch closer to where you want to be. Accept that it's okay to want more than you're able to do. It's okay to dream bigger than you can achieve. That's great. That's what dreams are. So keep dreaming, and then keep taking very small steps. Keep being okay with doing just some of the work today. Some is better than none, and some is the only way to get to all. You have to start with just some of the work. You have to start with 15 minutes on your feet, and 10 minutes on your hips, and 10 minutes working on your elbows, and 10 minutes on balancing drills. You don't have to start with 90 minutes at a time. You don't have to start with 2 hours. Sometimes you will be able to, and you'll have a very great season of your life where you can always dedicate 2 hours a day to it. But if you're in a season where you can't, you have to learn to be okay with a little bit, because a little bit is still better than none. And a little bit's the only way to get any step further. You're allowed to want progress. You're allowed to want meaningful growth. You're allowed, also for the record, you're allowed to not want any of that. You're allowed to not want to improve. You're allowed to just be happy with keep going and enjoying the classes. You don't have to want progress either. Ballet is yours. Ballet is yours for the taking. You're allowed to want progress and growth and all of that. And you're allowed to dream big, and you're allowed to want more than you can create. You don't have to dream it and be able to do it. It's okay for there to be a gap. Let that gap be for a long time. Maybe it'll take you 5 or 10 years to close that gap. Are you okay with having that gap for that long? Because that might be how long it takes, especially if you've got big dreams. It might take that long. And you have to be okay with being in that messy middle part for that whole period of time. The whole idea of this episode, how to stick around for long enough to get any good at it. how to stick with each facet long enough to actually master that facet, how to focus in on one while you're okay with letting the others sit on the sideline while you work on that one facet, while you focus on that one thing. This is a skill that's huge in life too. How do you focus on one thing while you let the other go without the guilt of not being in the other place? Can you learn that in ballet? Can you learn how to focus on what you want and let the other things sit for a sec until you come back? Or is that thought too agitating and you have to just stop? You have to stop. You have to give it up. You have to quit because it's too painful to have to work in small increments. There's no right or wrong answer here, of course, but if you want that progress, if you want to keep going for that many years, there'll be times when you have to work on just a little bit at a time, and you have to work in smaller increments than you wish you could. And that's okay. That's part of it. We all go through those seasons of life. We all go through that part of it. And again, as we're learning ballet in adulthood, it is all about the balance of the dance of how much you can put in, how much you need to put into other areas, where you can squeeze ballet into your life creatively, and how you make ballet exactly for you, exactly how you want it. So to wrap up this whole season of Broche Banter, I hope that you will take away from the very beginning. We talked about the mindset of going against that perfectionist tendency. Oftentimes, us perfectionists, we are drawn to ballet because there's a black and white, a right and wrong, a yes and a no, and that can ironically drive us right out of the studio. And then we went into all the different areas of ballet, the depth of technique, the breadth of vocabulary, the wide world of how many different steps we have. We went into artistry and musicality and point work and turns and jumps. And now we're talking about how to make it yours. How to be okay with the discomfort and the doubt and the guilt, how to find motivation, how to craft your own ballet journey, how to ask for what you want, how to fight for yourself, how to fight for your time in the studio, how to answer the question, what's it for? How good can I get? Does it even matter? Why bother? How to find your purpose for learning ballet. Keep returning to your why on those difficult days when that doubt creeps up, and try not to let yourself quit letting ballet fade away into the distance when you didn't mean for it. Be present in your ballet journey. Be present in your life. Remember that ballet is always yours. You're allowed to want or not want any or all aspects of ballet. And remember that what you dream will drive you to get there, but there will be a gap in time there. And we learn to be okay with that gap. We learn to be okay with dreaming bigger than what we can do today, what we can do tomorrow, what we can do next week. Remember that progress will come and go. Friends, teachers, and studios will come and go. But ballet and your love of it will be there for you. It'll be there through the ups and downs of your life. And I hope as long as ballet has a place in your heart, that you put in the work to keep carving out time for yourself, to keep carving out time for your ballet goals. Life is short. We might as well do what we want. We might as well dance as much as we want or as little as we want, and really take our spot at the ballet bar. Take up the space, take up your spot on the stage, step into the spotlight, find your place, find your community, find your people, and get to work. So dancers, I hope you've had a lot of fun with me on this season of Broche Banter, the facets of ballet. We'll be rolling right into our next season where I'll be interviewing all kinds of different dancers. You all loved the interviews in season 1. I may integrate some solo episodes here and there, but I really love the conversations with people in the community to help you continue getting inspired by people, just like we talked about in this last episode, how to make ballet part of your life. So I'll be having conversations with people who are making ballet part of their life. Maybe ballet has come and gone for them. Maybe they have different experiences like you, and we'll be telling stories that hopefully resonate with you in your ballet journey. If you want to be on the podcast, drop me a line, hello@brocheballet.com. I would love to hear from you, and I'd love to have you on the show. So dancers, until next time, I hope I'll see you in the studio, and I always wish you happy dancing.